Now that we're done with Beowulf, the saga of the Volsungs, and the various Icelandic sagas and tales, we will continue to talk about Nordic myths, and we will now move on to another country, and we will move from the other parts of Scandinavia to Finland, which is sometimes referred to geographically as Fennoscandia, but culturally it shares a lot with the Scandinavian cultures and is typically understood to be part of Scandinavia. Now we will move on to discuss the Kalevala, which is the Finnish national epic, and this is the book that we will be using for this. I'm sure you already have your own copies, and we will be reading this entire book, even though it looks very long. This is a poem. It is in the poem form, so it reads relatively quickly, so don't be discouraged by the many pages that you will have to read, because it goes fast. I have posted a lot of resources for you on the blackboard, so you can check them there, and there are excerpts from the page of the Kalevala Society in Helsinki, Finland, where they hold a lot of resources there, and now also English language resources are available. So there are excerpts posted on that particular page, and I have shared those, and they come from, many of them come from the Kalevala Guide by Ilmarita Järvinen. So this is a great resource. It gives you summaries of the chapters or the poems, which in the original Finnish are referred to as Runo. So there are 50 Runos, and they are divided into these cycles that focus on various facts. So you will be meeting a lot of very interesting people, some very tragic events, but some very funny events as well. So it'll be totally different from what you typically read. Reading the Kalevala will put you into a small group of cultural elite, because you can be sure that it's not the average person who has read this. So you will read this now, and you will become members of that group who has tackled this. What we have, like in the Icelandic sagas, what we found there are these very deep human concepts, human questions that people need to solve, and in everyday life. What we find some characters that they're good one day, and they're not so good one day. They are foolish one day, they're very wise on another day, and it's just quite fascinating. So you will meet a lot of characters with long names, and in this case we will be working with pronunciation. I can promise you that I can pronounce them like they were intended to be pronounced, because Finnish is my native language. So let me first give you an overview of the Kalevala here on this PowerPoint, and I will be posting this also on Blackboard, of course. So Kalevala is the Finnish national epic. Where are we? Where is Finland? This is modern-day Finland, a map of modern-day Finland. Here we have Norway. We've been visiting Norway and the Vikings for quite a while. We've been in southern Sweden with Beowulf, where he killed the dragon. We've been in Denmark, which is further down here, south of the map south of Sweden. We have been in Iceland, which is way back from Norway, or west from Norway. In Iceland, we went even further. We went to Greenland. We went all the way to North America with the Vikings. We went to England with them and those areas. So now we are leaving these areas here, Beowulf's stomping grounds, the Egil's stomping grounds, and the other characters in Norway, Iceland, and then the Greenlanders going all the way to North America. We are going to be moving west, and this is Finland. Finland is a country that shares borders up there in the north with Russia, with Norway, and with Sweden, and it is in between east and west, so to say, culturally. Even today, it's kind of like this in-between place. And where we will be going is to these parts of Finland that used to be Finland before the Second World War. They have been, parts, the borders of Finland have been drawn several times. First of all, Finland didn't become an independent country even before 1917. So it's been independent just about 100 years, a little bit over 100 years. First, it was part of Sweden all the way to 1807. Finland was just a part of Sweden, kind of like, the back woods of Sweden. But then in 1809 it became part of Russia, and therefore it was a Grand Duchy of Russia from 1809 to 1917, when it gained its independence. So that's kind of like the political background of Finland. But then during the Second World War, Finland had more territories here and over here, and what is interesting is that Finnish is a language that is spoken in Finland mainly, and then there are other Finno-Ugric languages that are spoken here in northern parts of Russia, like in Siberia. But the dialect of Finnish that is spoken here east of the current Finnish border would be the Karelian dialects, and those are the dialects in which the Kalevala was written, but it's a Finnish dialect, so it's not a different language from Finnish, but it's a different dialect, quite notably different. So of course we are reading a translation, an English translation, and this is Keith Bosley's translation. The author of the Kalevala is often said to be Elias Lönnrot, and we'll talk about him in a moment. He was the one who in the 19th century collected these oral poems and put them together in a semi-cohesive story line, also adding some narrative there, here and there. So sometimes Lönnrot is called the author, but this is all mostly based on the oral tradition, ancient songs. Therefore, we are the poems that you will be reading, or this poem, the Kalevala, it has its roots in ancient times, prehistoric times, before these were written down. Lönnrot is the one who did the work and collected the stories from singers in these areas here in these areas of what was then Finland, Russia. So anyway, let's look at the Kalevala in a little bit of a bigger context. When Finland was not an independent state, which happened in 1917, when it was a Grand Duchy of Russia under the Russian Tsars. There was this very strong national romantic movement in Finland, also elsewhere, based on the idea that a people needs to have its culture appreciated, recorded, and that recording the culture will then bring identity for its people. This is basically, the Herderian notion that one nation, one language, one nation, one culture, and of course that in our societies that hasn't really worked all that well, but we need to remember that Finland was not independent at all. It had always been part of another bigger nation, bigger culture, bigger state, part of Sweden, and then just then moved to be under Russia, and it didn't have its own. It couldn't fully determine its own, even though it was an autonomous Grand Duchy. Those rights started to be kind of like eroding, and the Russian Tsar, toward the end, around 1900, on both sides, that there were more and more restrictions. More and more Russian officials were sent to Finland to be taking care of the official businesses and so on. So it's nominally self-governing, but not really. So that kind of led to a very strong national romantic movement, and the national romanticism in Finland, it affected all the areas of culture. It affected art, and you'll be seeing a lot of artwork that is based on national romanticism, and it's based on the Kalevala, because at this point the Kalevala was published first time in 1835, erase what I just said, 1835, that was the first time it was, Elias Lönnrot published it. And after that, we have all these other areas of culture where references are made to the Kalevala. It's like this source where you can pull a lot of ideas. And in the area of art, in the area of music, the Finnish composer Jean Sibelius has drawn or drew a lot from the Kalevala, a lot of ideas, a lot of themes from the Kalevala. In the art, we will look at those. Architecture, the styles were based on national romanticism. Literature, of course, I mean, the Kalevala is the most concrete literary piece that it's kind of like the embodiment of the Finnish national romantic movement. And of course the language is one, because Finnish language did not have a good standing in Finland. Swedish was the language of the ruling upper class, and the official language in most official situations. And then there was also the Russian language, which was the language of the people who were sent to Finland by Russia to be in certain official positions. But Finnish language was the language of the majority. It was the language of the people, and the national romantic movement in Finland emphasized the importance of Finnish language to the future independence of Finland. Here's an old map of Finland or Northern Europe here, and you can see that the lines that have been drawn for present-day Finland and that were drawn earlier, typically after a war between Russia and Sweden, and then Finland was kind of like in between. So okay, where's the border going to be? So at one time it was drawn here. It's been drawn differently at different times. Finland is sometimes referred to as Maiden Finland, very romantically. So here's her right hand, and at some point in history, Finland had, before the Second World War, it had another hand here, which actually provided access for Finland to the Arctic Sea. So Finland had, for a few decades, it had access to the Arctic Sea through that left arm. It also had this hem line here, further down in the southeast of Finland, which then this area was lost after the Second World War to the Soviet Union, Russia having become the Soviet Union then. But Finland was independent. It fought for its independence in the Second World War. It was able to keep it, even though it was a difficult time for the country. But anyway, so a lot of areas were lost. My point here is that the map lines have been drawn multiple different times. What we are interested in when we read about the Kalevala are the areas around here, which are now part of Russia. Okay, but this border was a more fluid border at that point, because Finland was part of Russia during the time when Elias Lönnrot made his explorations to collect the poems for the Kalevala. So this just kind of like gives you an idea of that historical situation. Here is the man, Elias Lönnrot. He lived between 1802 and he died and 1884. So he was a man of many talents. He was a folklorist. He was interested in folk culture. He was a philologist, so he knew languages. He was a botanist, knew about plants, and you will see that in the Kalevala. There are a lot of plants have a lot of importance for the Kalevala. He was also a medical doctor and a professor of Finnish language at what is now the University of Helsinki. So he published the Kalevala in 1835, and the kanteletar were kind of like the leftover stuff that didn't fit into the Kalevala, because what Elias Lönnrot did was he wanted to make these collected songs that he had collected from Karelia, from that area between which is now Russia. So he wanted to make them into some kind of a coherent story. Not everything fit in there. There were a lot of poems, so you have this kanteletar, but these works became very important for Finland's struggle for independence, for independent identity. So we are not Swedes, even though for centuries we were part of Sweden. We're not Russians either. So there was this saying, we are not Swedes, we won't become Russians, let us be Finns. So that's kind of like the embodiment of the idea of before Finland's independence in 1917. But having the Kalevala was very important because some people said that now that we have the Kalevala, thanks to Elias Lönnrot, we have our own epic, just like the Greeks have Homer and Iliad. So we have this important cultural story, and they were, in a way, they were right, because the stories you'll be reading in the Kalevala, they are not as commonly taught as world literature as the Greeks and the Romans are taught, but they are fascinating stories, and they go right to the heart of what it is to be human and have the human struggles. So Lönnrot here he is. He had a large family, and here we have a family picture. You can see that we're in the 19th century in this picture. And here is Lönnrot, just a picture of him. Is extremely talented, multi-talented person, a medical doctor, a botanist, a philologist, a folklorist, and so on. And he did this huge work, which was extremely significant. So he made several trips to Karelia, and this is a map of his trips. So he did one trip in 1832, 33, 34, and 35, and you can imagine how his family felt. He was living here so it was a long trip, and he walked in these areas, and he collected those Runos, those poems, and they were very often sung. That he had older people who were sitting, and in the evenings, when the day's work is done, and they started singing these songs, and Lönnrot wrote them down. So if this is 100 kilometers, I'm sorry it doesn't show here. Yeah, it does if I pull this down. So we've got 100 kilometers here, this distance, and that's like 65-ish miles. So you can imagine how far he went, and far away from his family. So it was a sacrifice on his family to give them credit as well. So this is not Elias Lönnrot, this is Akseli Kalevala, who was quite a bit younger than Lönnrot, but if you think about the fact that the Kalevala had been published first, it was published then later in 1849, but in 1835 it was published first. And so it was 30 years before Akseli Kalevala. He's a painter who is connected to the Kalevala because of the paintings that he did. He illustrated a big edition of Kalevala, an illustrated edition, and he drew in his work as a painter. He drew from the Kalevala, and you will see how striking his paintings are. Here is on the cover of your book. You've got a Kalevala painting of one of the key important Runos, where we have a little bit of shape shifting. So a woman changing herself into this eagle, kind of huge bird, and this is our protagonist, Väinämöinen, and they fight over what is this strange strange mythical machine, the Sampo. So anyway, he has illustrated the Kalevala, and his paintings are extremely striking. And very often when people think about the Kalevala, Kalevala, it has become materialized through his paintings. That's why I put him here. So so you'll be seeing a lot of those paintings. Here is one, Joukahainen's Revenge. You will, in today's readings that were assigned for today, you're introduced to Joukahainen. He's the one he's the jerk who confronts Väinämöinen, the older person, on the snowy road, who gets to take the road, and you need to step aside, you old man, and so on. So this is one of his illustrations. There's his mother, and always trying to protect his son from doing stupid things, and with very little effect. More of Akseli Gallen-Kalela's paintings. This is the so-called Aino triptych. 3 paintings there. It's Aino, this beautiful maiden, who is promised by his brother to be the bride, the wife of Väinämöinen. And Väinämöinen is much older than she is. We'll talk more about that. Here's Väinämöinen trying to catch Aino, and Aino escapes. And so this is another painting of Akseli Gallen-Kalela. Here's a more detailed picture. You can kind of see the agony on her face, and here is the old Väinämöinen, who just wants to have a young, beautiful wife. And here's a newer rendition of the same scene of Aino. She's one of the protagonists. Then we have Ilmarinen. I'm just kind of like showing you like a pictorial, quick view of snapshots of different scenes that you will be reading about in detail. So Ilmarinen is a smith, and he is here. There is this big theme where different men want to have a girl from the North Farm as their wife, and the mother of the girl makes them do all these different things in order to get to marry the girl. And one of the tasks that Ilmarinen is given is that typically there are like 3 tasks. Do this, oh that wasn't good enough, do this, that wasn't good enough, do a 3rd task. And Ilmarinen is given this task of having to plow a field of vipers. And here are the vipers. And here is Ilmarinen, his horse. He's a smith. So what he does is he makes metal shoes for his horse, so that the vipers won't bite the horse. And he goes and he plows the field of vipers. So there's a little bit of relatively obvious symbolism here. You've got the vipers here toward the east of the picture on the right hand side, and that's of course a reference to Russia as the viper. And anyway, you find some of that in the pictures of Akseli Gallen-Kalela. Here is a picture of the mythical tool, the Sampo, that needs to be made first, before it can start producing these wonderful things to its owner, and the owner becomes the hostess, the lady of the northern farm. Here's another character whose name is Lemminkäinen, and here's Lemminkäinen's mother. He's another foolish young man, and he is kind of like a womanizer, and no, not kind of like a womanizer, he is a womanizer, and he does all kinds of silly things, and he wants to go to the war, and he's one of these very restless person, and his poor mother is always trying to say, okay, don't do it, that's foolish, and he doesn't care. He goes and does it anyway. At one of his adventures, he finds himself at the river of the death, and or that place between living and death, and he's thrown into the river, and he's torn into pieces, and he dies in the river, and his mother knows that he's dead, because when he leaves for this particular trip, he does many trips, when he leaves for this particular trip, he says, "Mother, you will know that there's something wrong with me if my hairbrush starts bleeding." His hairbrush starts bleeding one day, and the mother knows that his son must be dead. So she starts looking for him, and he finds him. He literally rakes his body parts from the river of Tuonela, the river of death, and puts him back together, a little bit like Frankenstein, but she is able to make him alive again. It's kind of like the mother's love. My wayward son, and I'm going to make him alive again because I love him so much, and that's what happens. So this is quite a striking picture, and it of course has these intertextual, so to say, interpictural connections to the Bible, where Mary has her son killed and mourns him. Here is the picture from the cover of our book, and here you can see Väinämöinen, this white-bearded old man, and his buddies, and this is called the stealing of the Sampo. That's that magic gadget, and owned by this weird creature with wings, shape-shifted lady of the North Farm, and we'll read about that. Here is another character, Kullervo, and he's a very tragic character, and we'll see what happens to him. He's like this really, he's an orphan. He thinks he's an orphan. He ends up in an incest situation with his own sister, because they don't know that they are siblings, and he ends up killing people and all sorts of things. So here is another picture of Kullervo, a very famous picture. Kullervo going to the war. Striking colors. All these pictures are by Akseli Kalevala. We looked at that already, and here we have the river of Tuonela, and this is kind of like, symbolic. This is what happens to people when we die. We have to move on and take our boats and cross the river. And here is the ending of the Kalevala. We get to the last poem, the last Runo, number 50, and here we have a Christ child is being born, not referred to as Jesus, but the mother has the Finnish version of Mary as her name, and here's Väinämöinen, the central figure in this whole book, and he is stepping aside into a boat to cross the river, and he is leaving his gift of singing. The gift, it's more than just singing, it's this entire cultural heritage. And at the same time, because we have the Christ child with a halo here, who's just been given birth by the Virgin Marjatta, also a virgin like Mary. And so what we see is the pagan culture giving way to Christianity. Okay, let me turn on the light, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Kalevala, the beginning of the story. First couple of Runos. All right, so Runo number 1. So what we have here is it's titled In the Beginning, first Runo, and this is the first Runo of the first Väinämöinen cycle. So we have these cycles in this long collection. So we have Väinämöinen, first Väinämöinen cycle. You love these diacritics. Here's first Väinämöinen cycle. I'm sorry. It's Runos 1 through 10, and we're just doing the first couple of them here today. It's easy to mispronounce the name Väinämöinen, so just try saying aloud Väinämöinen, Väinämöinen. In all Finnish words, the stress is all on the first syllable. So you know, if it's a Finnish word, the stress will always be on the first syllable. That's why I am not Helena or Helena, I'm Helena. So stress on the first syllable. I often hear American pronunciations of Väinämöinen, stress here, or strong secondary stress. No, the stress goes on the strong stress on the first syllable. Väinämöinen. Väinämöinen, Väinämöinen. Try saying it aloud. So this is a sound that English doesn't have, and so it's difficult. You have to focus on it. Öinen, Väinämöinen, and that's just easy if you just say an and then round your lips. It becomes an Väinämöinen. Okay, Väinämöinen. Now you know how to pronounce that. They look intimidatingly difficult just because they are long, and you will, by the way, you will notice that NEN is very often the ending of a word, and even today you will see, like, you know, there are a lot of Finnish hockey players in various teams in North America, and if you see anyone whose name ends in NEN, it's like, that's a Finn. So we start the first a canto, runo or canto, or poem, or song, whatever you want to call them. I like to call them runo because that's the original term. So the first one is In the Beginning. And what we have is the Kalevala opens up with a creation story, a story of origin. How did this world come to be? How come we have the sky? How come we have the earth? How come we have the waters? How come we have the sun, the moon, the stars, the vegetation? And this is where we get one of these explanations. Of course, this is strikingly reminiscent of the Bible, where we get the story of origin, the creation story, and God used 6 days to create the world, and the seventh day he rested. Here it's different. We are dealing with a pagan culture. You will see kind of references to Christianity, and that is thanks to Lönnrot, but the collector of these poems. But basically, we're talking about pagan times. And the story of origins is different, literary origins. So in the very beginning, the first 3 pages are actually just the prelude to the story itself. And here we have kind of like the narrator telling what happens. I have a good mind, take into my head, to start off singing, begin reciting, reeling off a tale of king, and singing a tale of kind. Now what you need to get used to when you read this is that things are always said 2 times, not only once, but 2 times. And you get a little bit of that also in the Beowulf, where things were referred to with multiple different names, and you have these kennings. Well, we have the similar thing going on here also. It's always, there's one line and then you say the same content in other words. So you find a lot of synonyms or near synonyms, or just something that is almost the same thing, and not repeated, but you have this kind of repetition, dressing the same content in different words. And so in the middle, a little bit towards, below the middle of this page, you have this, there's an asterisk, there's a note about that, let's strike hand to hand. And this is what people did. So I don't have 2 people here to demonstrate this, but you had like a long bench, and you had one singer. These were typically men, but women sang too. So you had a man sitting here, another man sitting here, and they are holding each other's hands, like putting their fingers in the middle of the other person's fingers, and they go back and forth and back and forth, and they sing in a very not monotonous, but it's a relatively simple melody. Now, what I did, I posted that melody on your blackboard, and it's sung by a folk metal group, current. Today's world, it's called Ensiferum. It's a Finnish metal band, folk metal band, and they sing the Kalevala melody. And that is how you can actually sing all these songs when they are in the original Finnish. Of course, what we are working with is a translation. So the Kalevala meter it's a trochee, and it's a tetrameter. So it is like dum da dum da dum da dum da. Yes, so yes, okay, so I'll give you the opening lines. I have a good mind, take into my head. So the opening line in Finnish, and you don't need to know this in Finnish, of course, but this illustrates the kind of rhythm that all these poems, all these runos are sung in. Mieleni minun. So when we just say this, it's mieleni minun tekevi. I have a good mind. I want to do something. So mieleni, but we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's a tetrameter. You have 8 syllables. Mieleni minun tekevi. Here, when these are sung, then there becomes a violation against the rule that the first syllable gets the stress, because this follows this very, very rigid trochaic tetrameter. Trochaic is where you have the stress on the first syllable, and then the next syllable is not stressed. So we have mieleni minun tekevi. I can't sing, but I did it anyway. So mieleni minun tekevi. And yeah, so every other syllable gets the stress, and that's what the people were doing. They were touching each other's hands like this, locking their fingers into the other person's. And I wish I could sing better, but that's why I posted the Ensiferum melody for you. So just click on that. It's because it's a metal group. It's still a beautiful melody, and they don't do too much of the metal stuff for this particular piece, but they do a lot of very, very heavy metal kind of stuff. Also, those songs, they're drawing from the Kalevala, and there are several heavy metal or folk metal bands in Finland that draw inspiration for their songs from the Kalevala. So it's quite interesting. Okay, anyway, so this first part, it's a prelude to the whole story in the Kalevala. On page 3, long my tale's been in the cold, for ages has lain hidden. Shall I take the tales out of the cold, scoop the songs out of the frost, bring my little box indoors, the casket to the seat end, under the famous roof beam, under the fair roof? Shall I open the wood chest and unlock the box of tales, unwind the top of the ball, untie the knot of the coil? I will sing quite a good tale. This is the promise. Quite a fair one I'll beat out. After some rye bread and some barley beer, if beer is not brought and ale is not offered, I'll sing from a leaner mouth. After water I will lilt, to cheer this evening of ours, to honor the famous day, or to amuse the morrow, and to start the new morning. So people were doing this to entertain themselves. They were singing these ancient, orally transmitted songs or runos, and passing the tradition from generation to generation. The little children were listening to the old people sing, and of course the singing helps the words to pass, because we remember the melody and it's easier to put the words into that melody. Now there is another literary technique that the original Finnish Kalevala shows very clearly, and Bosley's translation does quite a bit of this in the same way as it's more dramatic because it's been translated from Finnish, which is not even related to English. It's not an Indo-European language like English is, and German and Russian and Swedish, or Finnish is a Finno-Ugric language. So it's structurally very different. But from this very different language, Bosley has translated it into English, and there are 5 different translations. This is a very doable translation for English college people, but there are others. So when we read the Beowulf, we didn't read that in the original either. It was all translated into present-day English. Now, of course, the distance between Old English and present-day English is not as large as it is from Finnish Karelian dialect to English, so there's a bigger distance. But what these translators, Bosley here, have tried to do is to retain some of that. You cannot do consistent trochaic tetrameter. So, like here, that you have the trochaic da 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 in these packages of 4, every single line. You can't do it, but that's behind it. But the other literary device, very common oral literary device is alliteration, just like in Beowulf. So we have alliterating lines, alliterating a lot of that going on. Like if just looking at the first line in Finnish, mieleni minun, mind, mine, my mind, mieleni minun. So you have alliterating here. And the next line is aivoni ajattelevi, my brain is thinking. So we have alliterational assonance because these are vowels. So aivoni ajattelevi, words starting with the same sound. That was one of the characteristics of the Kalevala stories. At the bottom of page 3, the story really begins. I heard it recited thus. I knew how the tale was made. With us the nights come alone. The days dawn alone. So was Väinämöinen born alone. The eternal bard appeared from the woman who bore him, from Air-daughter, his mother. So we are introduced to a mythical Air-daughter, and that is Väinämöinen's mother. We don't have an awful lot of references to her afterwards, but you will hear an echo from the Song of the Volsungs when you hear how Väinämöinen actually was born, and that is interesting to start making these connections. So what happens is this is the creation story. How did this world come to be? And it came to be because there was a lass, an air girl, a nice nature daughter. She long remained holy, she was a virgin, forever girlish, in the air's long yards on its level grounds. But she gets bored, like any young girl, being alone, and she wants to have some action, so to say. Her times grew weary, and her life felt strange from being always alone, living as a lass in the air's long yards, in the empty wastes. So now she steps further down, launched herself upon the waves, on the clear high seas, upon the open expanse. Then what happens? So she decides to leave, she's just hanging around in the air, totally alone, gets bored, and goes to the waves, on the waves. There came a great gust of wind. From the east, nasty weather lashed the sea to foam, whipped it into waves. The wind lulled the maid, and the billow drove the lass about the main blue, and the froth capped waves, and the wind blew her womb full. The sea makes her fat. So she becomes pregnant from the sea foam, and there she is, and she starts having the birthing pains. So she bore a hard womb. When the baby is getting ready to be born, the womb becomes just completely hard, and then you have the labor pains. And that's how the babies are born after 9 months, but not in this case because it's Väinämöinen, and he is being hatched for 30 years, reminiscent of someone else in the saga of the Volsungs. It took 6 years for Volsung to be born. Her mother was pregnant for 6 years, and Volsung wouldn't want to come out, and then the mother finally sacrificed herself, said, "I'm going to die of this horrible pain, and you need to cut the child out." And that was Volsung. But here we have a different way out for Väinämöinen. He is inside her mother's womb for 30 years. So she bore a hard womb, a difficult bellyful, 700 years, 9 ages of man, but no birth was born. No, it was not 30 years. It was like 700 years, 9 ages of man that Väinämöinen is in the womb. I'm sorry, he was 30 years old when he was born, so this is much longer than Rerin's wife in the saga of the Volsungs, the queen. She was pregnant for 6 years, and then Volsung was born as a little boy already, who was able to speak, but so will Väinämöinen, because he will be 30 years old, but he has been in the mother's womb for hundreds of years. So no creature was created, page 5. The lass rolled as the water mother. She swims east, swims west, swims northwest and south, swims all the skylines in fiery birth pangs, in hard belly woes. But no birth was born, no creature was created. And she whimpers and feels pity for herself, and starts praying. And who she's praying is Ukko. Ukko is not mentioned as Ukko, but that is the Finnish equivalent of thunder god Thor, and well, he's the main god, so it could be anyway, he prays for old man, chief god, upholder of all the sky. Come here when you are needed, come this way when you are called. Free a wench from a tight spot, a woman from belly throes. Come quickly, arrive promptly, most promptly where the need is. And what happens is